Good morning, everyone. Warm welcome to the Gisborne District Council Sustainable Tairāwhiti meeting. I'm going to ask our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Wharehinga, to open with Karakia.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Me noi tātou. Manawa mai te mauri nuku, manawa mai te mauri rangi, kei ahau te mauri tipua, kei ahau te mauri tāwhitu, kei ahau te mauri motea. No tiki tiki o rangi, no te wai ororo tāne te wai ora. Tēnei te mauri ka whakapiki, tēnei te mauri ka whakakake, tēnei te mauri ka puta ki te whai au ki te ao mārama. Haumi e hui e, tāwhitu.
Good morning and welcome. Our two coast councillors, Councillor Pahuruhuriwai and Councillor Parata, they've already been texting me since 6:15 when they left home. They'll join us in the next 15 minutes. There are a few hold-ups on State Highway 35, so they are on their way. Councillor Ria texted her apology in. Anyone else? No. No, not at all. Are you happy to pass our apology for Councillor Ria and lateness, Councillor Pahuruhuriwai and Councillor Parata?
I move.
Thank you. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Alder. All in favour?
Aye.
Contrary carried. Any declarations of interest on our Sustainable Tairāwhiti agenda today? No, nothing that I can hear. Let's go to our minutes, page 4. Those were emailed out by Annie way back. Anyone have any issues of correction? If not, is someone happy to pass the minutes as a fair representation of the hui? Councillor Telfer, seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favour? Contrary carried. We've got our action register. Let's take a little look. These are all in progress. These are all work happening. There will be some updates on our recovery. We'll carry on here. So, councillors, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure. No, I'm not there yet. Leave of absence. No. And then acknowledgement and tributes.
Can I?
Yep.
Can I make one through your worship just to acknowledge, and I will see him in person later, but it's EMPD's 35th anniversary today.
Oh. Thank you for that. And then I also just publicly want to acknowledge the passing of Kiwi Campbell, one of our Waka Ama queens. It leaves a huge, huge gap in our community, and our thoughts are with her whānau in this very, very sad time. Okay, I think we have the lovely team from Te Uru Kahika online. Wave out if you're online. Not yet, Jules? Okay. Well, what we will do, I'm going to carry on with our work. When they are ready, we'll stop and we will listen to their input. So they are on a roadshow, a virtual roadshow, which they will talk to us. Nadine, can you give us a tiny bit of background information
Yes, so
just about Te Uru Kahika?
Yep, so Te Uru Kahika is our collaborative body that represents the 16 regional and unitary authorities across New Zealand. So they're represented by the mayors and chairs of each of the regions, and we also have a network of chief executives that meet regularly to support the sector on particular issues that relate to regional sector, essentially. And we have, as they will walk through a presentation, the collaborative network supports us in terms of the work that we do, like submissions, like understanding and advocating for real big issues around RMA. We've also had staff that come into region to support us, so it's really an opportunity for councillors that aren't aware of all the work that Te Uru Kahika does to get an insight into the mahi that we're doing across New Zealand.
So I think what we're going to do, Nadine, is just carry on for now, and then we will, as soon as they are online, we'll just pause and carry on. So we've got no extraordinary business, no notices of motion, no adjourned business. So welcome, Joe. Councillors, I'm going to take you to page 12. And that is the piece of work that we're doing on our climate change work program. I'll hand over to you. Hi, Sally. And then you guys lead us, and then we'll open the floor for questions from councillors.
Thank you. I'll let Sally talk to the report. In essence, after Cyclone Gabriel, some of our planned climate change response mahi took a bit of a pause as staff will redeploy to other work within council, particularly focusing on recovery. And now we are finally getting to a point where we can take stock and reset and plan again for the future. Over to you, Sally.
Yeah, thanks. So, I'm happy to take the report as read. That was a good introduction. So we're really just looking for some feedback on our priorities going forward and take questions.
Okay. Councillor Cranston.
With Paukahi being a major factor there, is there any opportunities to speed that process up, or is it just a waiting game for that to clean up?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty with that. The graph that is put in the report is based on a model from a global model. So there would be some kind of work around investigations for that actual site and the feasibility of any mitigation works at that site. So that was one of the first draft actions when the original drafting of the emissions reduction plan was being done. That was highlighted as one of the first steps. So we can't answer that exactly right now, unfortunately. But I think there is an ongoing program of remediation at that site that is managed with the trust, the Paukahu Trust, and I haven't had an update from Phil recently, but I understand there is some gas testing going on, planned there for early next year. So,
Okay, I'm going to pause us. Michael, I see you are there, but just when I said hello, you ran off. So, councillors,
I just had a panic call from Natasha saying, supposed to be on at 9 o'clock, and my diary said 9:15. So, apologies for that, a bit of confusion.
Good. Welcome, Michael. The floor is yours. We've Nadine has given a 30-second overview to councillors, just a little bit about Te Uru Kahika, but we are all ears, ready to listen what we do.
Right. Now, the first question, well, first of all, thanks for having me talk to you briefly today, and just to acknowledge you, Rahit, Your Worship, and Nadine. We work a lot together as part of the sector business, and certainly appreciate your leadership, both from a CE perspective and also from a governance perspective. And it's great to have you part of the sector. Also, just to acknowledge the challenges you've been through over the last couple of years, and from an observer watching from a little bit of a distance, I believe the council's done an exceptionally good job in navigating some really challenging issues for your communities, and no doubt there's more to come. So Tom's joined us. I'm not sure who's running the presentation, whether you can do it from your end or Tom's end. So we have a brief presentation. Just introducing Tom Bowen. He's the Executive Policy Advisor for Te Uru Kahika, one of about 5 staff that work for the sector in Te Uru Kahika land. So we've got a brief presentation, and Tom, are you doing that, or?
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, I can pull it up from here if that works for everybody.
Okay, so this, as Tom does that, Rahit, just sort of context, the purpose of this presentation is to connect with elected members broadly. Both Rahit and Nadine are pretty well familiar with what Te Uru Kahika is about, what our focus is, but we are really mindful that elected members more broadly from across the sector don't often have that connection to our work. So we're embarking upon this roadshow, and apologies, it's virtual for this first tranche because just time's quite tight for us. But our intention is to get out next year and run a similar sort of initiative with a bit more detail for each individual member councils. This is our first cut, so if there's any good feedback or bad feedback, post this presentation, really happy to take it. Te Uru Kahika, probably what is Te Uru Kahika, and the first question is where it's originated. So there is a video which we'll come to, which Piri Munro, who was part of our Ngā Kairapu special interest group, who was second chair at Hawke's Bay Regional Council, pulled this as part of the Ngā Kairapu SIG, which Nadine's very familiar with as the city sponsor for that special interest group. And Ngā Kairapu came up with the name Te Uru Kahika and gifted it to us. And there is a video that explains it. It may or may not work, Tom.
No, I will endeavour to get it to play. If it doesn't play or you can't hear the sound, someone just shout at me because it's not foolproof. You can see the screen though, yeah?
You can.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Let's try this.
He ao te rangi kau here, mā te huruhuru te manu karere ai. As clouds adorn the sky, so do feathers enable a bird to fly. Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Piri Munro. I'm here today for Ngā Kairapu, the Māori SIG, the Māori Special Interest Group. I'd like to share with you the story of Te Uru Kahika, the new name of regional and unitary councils in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The journey to a connected regional and unitary sector started several years ago with a view to connect our expertise, our relationships with others, and local knowledge collectively drawn on for the well-being of our environment and communities. The shared purpose and vision is to see Aotearoa New Zealand thrive. We work together, we learn from each other, we are stronger in unity than in isolation. He raupo tūtahi ka whati, he raupo kapo hia e kore e whati. The single raupo reed is broken easily, whereas raupo bundled together cannot be broken. Ngā Kairapu was invited to participate in naming the regional and unitary sector, and we gifted the name Te Uru Kahika, the grove of Kahikatea, the native white pine that is tall and prevalent in wet-prone areas, as a group or stand of trees. Being shallow rooting, each tree is reliant on its neighbour, intertwining one with the other, and in doing so, the trees spread their load, standing tall, standing firm, withstanding formidable pressure from outside forces. Te Uru Kahika is a metaphor for the power of our collective efforts as a connected, regional and unitary sector of Aotearoa, New Zealand. E tū kahikatea, stand tall like the kahikatea.
Okay, so that's a very special gift from Ngā Kairapu, and there's a lot of phrases you'll hear like special interest groups, obviously regional sector, virtual office. So the purpose of this is to try and just clarify where we fit into that framework, particularly how we fit into the framework with LGNZ as well. So we'll get to that shortly. But just highlighting the Ngā Kairapu special interest group. It's probably been the most successful and impactful group. It's only been around for about 3 or 4 years now because of the bringing together of our Māori leadership across the sector. And they have been under significant demand from government and from other agencies to connect in and getting that perspective. So credit to Nadine who oversees that special interest group. That is very influential in what we do and why we didn't have a similar special interest group 10 or 15 years ago, I don't know, maybe a sign of the time. So just to sort of go back in time a wee bit, special interest groups for our sector were established way back in 1990s, basically. When the Resource Management Act came into being, there was a bit of navigation we had to do, particularly around regional council functions, that part of your portfolio. around writing regional coastal plans, coastal policy statements. And we looked to each other, given there were 16 of us, that leaned on each other, knowledge and advice, and share approaches. So the model of engagement across the sector has been around for quite some time. And those special interest groups were really focused on professional knowledge and understanding. There are multiple groups across professions, be it scientists, be it transport, be it river engineers. And they had met for 20 odd years on a regular basis to talk about their professions and what's happening and share that knowledge. In recent years, the need for the sector to work at a more collective across the profession base has prompted the concept of Te Uri Kahika, and then spawned the virtual office. Importantly in that is that we lean heavily on our special interest groups. They have been the anchor point. You know, there's several thousand people who work in our sector that we can draw on their expertise and knowledge. And Te Uri Kahika, through the virtual office, which is made up of, you know, half a dozen staff, can then tap into that knowledge and set up multidisciplinary teams to go and support and do work. Te Uri Kahika is essentially an operational arm. Its governance is the chief executives of regional and unitary councils. We end up considering and approving the business plan that's developed annually and the budget that goes with that. But equally, because of the connection that we have with our elected members, kind of unlike local government sectors where you've got rural and provincial and you've got metros, the regional sector that Rehet's the deputy chair of, it has a close working relationship with chief executives. So we're kind of like all one. There's no real demarcation between governance and management in those forums. And because of that, Te Uri Kahika has an active place supporting the regional sector alongside local government. But the key emphasis from this slide is that it's very much about operational delivery and policy development, and also advocates on behalf of the sector where the sector is unified on particular issues. We'll go to the next slide, Tom. Probably covered a fair bit of this, and we'll draw on some examples of where that collaboration has been successful over the years. But quite clearly, the levels of skills and knowledge across the regional sector varies based on our balance sheets and our staff numbers. One of the real strengths of Te Uri Kahika is that we can share resources where one of our members needs some support. And I think you've had some support in recent years regarding the Gabrielle recovery, maybe in the civil defence space, but also in the engineering space from across the sector. So we're very much about the collective and advancing the collective views on things, but equally, we're about helping our individual members. And there are a number of examples where we've done that. The Te Uri Kahika model is a voluntary model. It has no construct like a CCO. It is actually a group of a coalition of the willing, and it's important that we manage things with that in mind, because it's very easy to step out of a voluntary model, but membership is really critical to us. Go to the next slide. So some of the more detailed things that we have been doing, and again, things I've probably covered briefly. The chief executives, as I said, are the governing body, and that's really useful because what it does do is ensure that the issues that get the greatest emphasis are those that land most commonly across our sector. Equally, where there are issues that might be unique to individual, you know, a limited number of regional or unitary councils, we have a coalition of the willing type approach to things where they might decide to co-fund things. You know, a good example could be the issues around, you know, maritime navigation and safety that may not affect my region, being in the mighty Manawatu, but it might be really material for other councils. So having the construct for Te Uri Kahika to work on those coalition of the willing initiatives is really helpful. I guess the strongest thing that we can do is provide a singular voice where appropriate into government on issues. And that's particularly important around policy setting, policy shaping, drawing on the expertise that government might want from us to be part of steering groups or advisory groups, we can handpick those from our network and plug in. What I want to stress there, though, is that even though there's a desire to have a unified approach on policy matters, we've got to respect that individual members in Te Uru Kahika might have slightly different views on policy setting, and we always respect that the local democracy will prevail, and our expressions into government on policy reform will be qualified by saying where appropriate that these may not represent all the views of all councils, and councils are free to express their own view. But by and large, probably 90% of the time, the things we express into central government are pretty much universally supported across the sector. Go to the next slide, Tom. Just some of the examples of at a macro level of the work we have been doing and have done for some time. Te Uru Kahika is about I guess a $3 to $4 million enterprise, but it's leveraged significant amount of money in various things. Going back to post-COVID as an example, Jobs for Nature and climate resilience funding. Those projects were channeled through the collective. They were gathered up by the collective and put into government. And I think the Jobs for Nature funding was circa $1.2 billion that came back to the regions, whether it be wilding pines, whether it be planting programs. But if we hadn't organised ourselves in a coordinated way to pitch in to government on behalf of the entire sector, it would be a far more challenging exercise. More recently, and probably dear to the hearts of your council and indeed mine, the Before the Deluge project. This has been a 3 or 4 year advocacy role on behalf of the sector to get government to step up and help fund flood protection and infrastructure for communities that are at risk. We all kind of know that there is an affordability question for our communities into the future, and rates alone won't cut it when the expectations are growing by the day for protection, and climate change then adds another layer of complexity on top of that. So we're really pleased after that long battle to secure the $200 million plus for Before the Deluge funding. As part of the Shane Jones infrastructure fund of $1.2 billion. The 0.2 is ours as a sector, and the important element there is, unlike the $1 billion that's likely to be allocated by way of a loan arrangement, our funding is a grant. So it is money coming to us from government with no real need to pay anything back. What's critical in those projects is delivery for the minister. So the first tranche of projects is underway at the moment. That's about $1 million worth of projects are now secured and underway. The second tranche of funding to clean out that extra $100 million that's left over will close around about, well, they're looking for registrations of interest through Te Uru Kahika by the end of this year, so around 20th of December. That'll then land, come back to us, and the councils who put something in and it meets the threshold will then get that funding. So I guess the message there, without a kind of a coordinated response that we provide, we may have struggled to get what we did in terms of that funding. There's a whole lot of other stuff in the freshwater space, and the biocontrol space, and in transport indeed, where the B card, that is the sort of interim ticketing arrangement for councils, all came through the Te Uru Kahika construct. And I guess, you know, coming back to our origins around the power of us working as a collective, I remember vividly at a regional sector meeting probably some 18 years ago, having been in my role 20 years now, in Gisborne, in your part of the world, where I launched the idea of LAWA to the regional sector chairs and mayors. And that entity, or LAWA, is an instrument by which collectively, as a sector, we can portray our collective knowledge and understanding. At that stage, it was freshwater, because others were telling our story, and we wanted to tell our own story around water and water quality, and that's where LAWA was born. So you're ground zero for that. Probably in that very room, we presented the LAWA project all those years ago.
Can
Can I just add a couple more that that aren't on there, but that councillors might not be aware of? So when we had the 2018 Queen's Birthday floods in Uawa, and we had to go through a massive prosecution, investigation, we, through the special interest groups, and at the time Nick Zaman, who I think might have been one of the leads in the CME space, was able to leverage the collective. So we had staff come in from Waikato Council, Regional Council, Bay of Plenty Regional Council and Taranaki Council to help us through that whole investigation process. So we wouldn't have been able to do it without that collective leading in and supporting us. And just more recently, we've just signed off our MOU with Hawke's Bay Regional Council for backup support for our harbour master. So again, another benefit for us as a Unitary Regional Council sector.
Thanks, Nadine. So I think, you know, there's lots of other examples too where the collective has worked to achieve outcomes, and that's something that will continue as well into the future. Next slide, we'll go to Tom. So specific to Tairāwhiti and some of the benefits for you, I appreciate that you've been really focused on Gabrielle recovery and probably don't have the bandwidth to, at this point, to pitch into things like the Before the Deluge projects. That opportunity will present itself. It's there, it's ready. But here are some of the examples of where you have benefited from. Our goal is to ensure that when we come and talk to you next year, we have a level of precision around this is what has been of specific benefit to you as a member council, in addition to what that macro national benefit might be. So the big one, going back to the Jobs for Nature example and shovel-ready projects, is that funding of stock banks way back in the day. So I suspect there'll be more demand on that into the future. So yeah, so I guess the other one that's relevant for councils that don't have big bandwidth in the policy sense is that in the last year we've submitted through Kahika on 11 national policy issues. Sometimes we wouldn't have bothered because we didn't have the scope, but now we've got 11 lodged in on behalf of the sector and another 7 in train. So what that means is the councils that don't have the policy expertise to actually compile the submission can rely on the Kahika submission, use it as a basis, add to it, subtract from it, and tweak it. So it's not always about you know, how much money we've secured from third parties for things. It's often about how have we avoided costs that a council might have otherwise incurred. So we want to spend some time next time we come to you and try and quantify that a bit more precisely. Next slide, Tom. So pretty much, you know, the whole basis of the Kahika name and its origins from that Teddy outline is very much the strength that we have standing together and lowering cost to communities. And that's the important one. You as elected members will go, yeah, it's all good, Michael. So give me the numbers. Give me the numbers and the evidence that says the investment we make in Kahika is worthwhile to my ratepayers. And that's something that we're very acutely aware of. Next slide, Tom. So chief executives approve a business plan. There's a lot more detail than this slide on the business plan. They identify specific projects, but these are our strategic imperatives. Obviously, the biggest one I think that stands out currently is the climate adaptation work. As I mentioned previously to other groups, probably Freshwater would have been the standout one 2 or 3 years ago. But at the moment, it's climate adaptation, and it's climate adaptation from both from a planning point of view, which links into the resource management reform priority, but also climate adaptation in terms of civil defence response, which again, Nadine's a CE sponsor for that special interest group, and also our intervention through infrastructure, which is obviously where the money starts to land for us. But to give you one example, in addition to the Before the Deluge work, we are now standardising and getting best practice across asset management for our flood protection assets. So we have Graham Campbell, who leads that out for Kahika, looking across our councils and saying who has really good asset management, how do we get best practice in place How do we get it implemented for all those that can rely on who does it well? Because that's critical if we're going to de-risk the insurance issue for us going forward. It'll be under sharp focus how we're doing around our asset management, and it will lessen the risk of things like class actions that a number of our colleagues are facing around asset performance, asset condition and the like. So asset management's a big activity in that climate adaptation space, along with many others. That's kind of it, I think. So I'm not Liz, so apologies from Liz, who was supposed to be here today. Sadly, she's had a bereavement in her family, and I've been roped in to stumble my way through alongside Tom. So, ngā mihi nui, everybody. Thank you, Rehet and Nadine. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Tom. Are there any questions from councillors, from Michael, Tom or Nadine, that you want to add anything?
Just through your worship, one thing I'm not sure if it was covered was because there are only 16 of us as compared to our TLA colleagues, and I'm sure the Mayor can relate to her relationships. We have that benefit of having closer relationships with the chief executives of the central government agencies, and also ministers tend to have a lot more time and airtime with the mayors and chairs of the regional sector, so that is another...
And it is the nitty-gritty stuff, you know, the flood protection, the public transport, the freshwater stuff, versus talking about, say, parks or roads or things that are more for the city council. So we are lucky that we can wear both hats, but I do know that ministers do enjoy coming there because they know they've got 16 people in the room covering the whole country. The messages are really clear and crisp, received and sent clear. So from a Gisborne District Council perspective, we really value that we have, if we just look at Gabrielle, when we had our friends from the north and from the south coming in to help us with civil defence, but then again our civil defence team could go to the west coast to help. So it is for different functions, and that might be a civil defence function, but those relationships are built in the regional sector. So when we do need to lean on each other, we don't have to go out and get consultants in. We can lean on other councils to give that function to us because they do the same work. So for a small unitary authority, it's a massive asset to have that group behind you. Councillor Parata.
I was just wondering if we use Te Kahika. I have strep throat. I was just wondering if we use Te Kahika for professional development, and if there's opportunities for seconding to our staff to other bigger councils, and if that's a way that we potentially look at giving people the opportunities to grow and then retain them long term for the region.
I can respond partly to that, if you like. So the answer is yes, but potential is much greater than what we've done so far. So we have an HR special interest group that's looking at skills and ability, recruitment, how do we attract people to our sector. But from a personal point of view, again, just acknowledging Ngā Kairāpu, who organised so far 2 wānanga with chief executives from across our sector, in terms of te ao Māori understanding, and that those wānanga have been really useful. So personally, I've received personal development in that space from Te Kahika, but I do think there is opportunity to grow this into the future. What I would say is the special interest groups are a really important sort of fertile ground to grow our knowledge and talent. You know, we get our people into our organisations, they become part of a special interest group, they become conveners of those special interest groups, and then they develop from there. So it's kind of no surprise that a lot of our succession and leadership roles in our sector, and you're an example of this as well, have come from within our organisations. And part of that, I think, is because the exposure our people get to each other outside, same profession, but a different council. And I think that's something that's really useful. But in answer to your question, yes, but very light touch at the moment, but there's a real potential.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can possibly add a little bit of nuance to that as well. I'm very much along the same lines, but I was once upon a time I was Michael's policy manager, and so two things about that. One is, as the policy manager in a region, that peer network across the other 15 regions was absolutely invaluable to test ideas and kind of make sure you're on the right page, but also for your staff, being able to connect them to people with more expertise in particular areas that might be at a different, but might be at Waikato, might be at Canterbury, even without actually physically putting them there, which is a great idea as well. But just the that connection to that bigger network and the expertise through was really valuable too.
I can add a little bit more as well to that. So the Human Resources Special Interest Group was hosted here. So Alicia is the manager of our People and Capability team, had the HR managers from across New Zealand, regional unitary sector. The piece of work that they're specifically looking at is the Māori capability report which I can share, which Ngā Kairapu provided, which looked at where we at as a sector in terms of our ability to engage and support in terms of enduring relationships. And so now the HR SIG has picked up that piece of work and is looking at what's a consistent training or what we do to deliver into each of our councils. So little steps, but we're kind of getting there.
Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, thanks for that. With the large funds like the before the deluge, excuse me, assume that's for the whole sector, but how is it then allocated out? Is there a board that makes those decisions, or how does allocation work?
So the process is that the member councils put forward their projects. So the key prerequisite to get past the first gate is there needs to be a level of co-funding, and that can be anywhere between 40% to 20%, depending on the mood, but you've got to be co-funding locked in, i.e. it's in your LTP or annual plan. Secondly, there is no regulatory impediment. In other words, you've got all your necessary consents for your stock bank construction or whatever it might be. These are really strong messages from Minister Jones. He doesn't want anything to slow down. Then we gather those up. So your officers will pitch into Graham Campbell, who have got a team to put those projects together in a package. And that package is put forward to government via Kānoa. Kānoa then has a process of reconciling what's high risk, what might meet the thresholds, and obviously human risk is a high one for them to look at. And for this government, it'll be human risk, but also economic risk by having, or benefit of having that infrastructure in place. Once Kānoa's got it, then they recommend to a group of ministers what projects get funded. And there's some thresholds as to how, if it's a large number, it triggers a high number of governance or political oversight. So the key thing is you pitch in, and I know that Graham would be in touch with your asset managers around what projects you want to pitch in for tranche 2. But for you as governors, the key thing is to make sure that you've got your co-funding agreed through your annual plan, and you've got those regulatory processes in place. So the key thing is delivery, and the first tranche of funding that we've received, a lot of pressure on us, those who have benefited from that first tranche of funding, is to get shovels in the ground, bulldozers working, and showing government we can deliver. And we know that's the narrative coming out from government. So that's kind of the process.
Thank you.
Hey, Michael, Tom, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and we know this is the first of many where you will keep us updated. Dean and I both see you regularly, but it's lovely for you to be able to beam in to the Gisborne District Council today and just catch up with our lovely colleagues. So we thank you for your time.
Thanks, Riet. And just one final thought for you to dwell upon, which is an idea Tom and I had yesterday. Recently we had the plenary, which is all the SIG conveners, our chairs and mayors in Wellington. About 90 people came to that, where we talk about the sector. We are contemplating, and it's something we're not going to commit to, but contemplating whether a similar plenary could be run for our wider members, elected members, post-election next year. So we realise that we have good knowledge and connection with our mayors and chairs, but often the elected members are kind of a bit in the dark about what's going on. This is an attempt to try and break that and get more connected. But maybe there's an opportunity for us to have a mini conference with all elected members from the regional sector in the future. I'll leave you with that thought.
Thanks a lot. Take care and have a lovely, what day is it? Wednesday? Have a lovely Wednesday.
Thank you.
Ka kite.
Monday. Did you? It does feel like a Monday. Okay, councillors, we are going to re-stretch and get ourselves, I'll remind you on what page. So Councillor Cranston asked a question, and I think Councillor Alder, you were just ready to ask your question. The floor is yours.
Just getting back to the dump, really, it's quite horrifying that 88% of our gas problem or our unwarming problem is our own doing in the dump. And methane is a problem. And yet methane's a resource. I'm thinking of Snedenko, who used their tomato waste and fueled their own energy from that. We've got a fuel-hungry pool. Is there no way we can cap what I'm guesstimating about 30 hectares and use that energy? Or just burn it, because in burning it's going to solve that.
Yes, that would be part of a feasibility trial for an assessment. It's unclear, I think, at the moment about what it would take to cap that site because it was a historic landfill that wasn't up to the current standards in terms of lining and capping. I think it's a bit uncertain about how feasible methane capture or flaring would be from that site. So that's my understanding of it at this stage, but it would require further investigation.
So newer landfills are designed to capture the gas and so you can easily extract it. Older landfills weren't.
So it could be very expensive to try and get it to that point, and at that point, would it be actually worthwhile doing all that work as the methane levels are predicted to drop over time anyway? So it's there needs to be a lot more work done to understand the cost-benefit analysis of supporting that at that site.
Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. In the recommendations, we don't have anything about our 2030 carbon neutral aspiration that we adopted a couple of years ago, because obviously 2040 is a little bit more realistic. So is this workshop that we're going to have, is that the outcome that you're wanting to achieve from this workshop, is to try and analyse the fact that 2040 was a way more realistic target than 2030?
So through you, Worship, that's one of the things we'd be discussing with you is targets, pros and cons, and then coming back to council for an actual decision on whether we stick with the 2030 target or move it to something different. It's not for us to direct you what to do, we'll give you advice.
Through this paper, it's pretty obvious that no one has got an appetite to buy carbon credits to offset our 2030 aspirations. So it seems like a long-winded process to get to a decision that pretty much is obvious.
Well, I think that, I think that original target, it was very aspirational, but it was also made as a decision without having a good amount of background data in terms of the implications for the costs and the actions that might be required. And so we didn't want to put that in front of you again as okay, what about a 2040 target without having a more detailed discussion of those implications and costs. So that's why we're proposing to give some time to get that information together for a workshop early next year to actually have that,
Through you, Your Chair, just confirming initially that you want us to continue working on an emissions reduction plan, sort of is that first recommendation in A. That is something that would need a little bit of staff resource, so we just want to get clarity that yes, that's still one of the many things we should be.
And to be fair, we did that, it was in 2019. A lot have changed since 2019, and there are also new people around the table, so I think it is a great way to get all the information again and workshop it, and then make an informed decision there. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. In preparation for discussing this paper today, I did a bit of research and discovered there is no Planet B.
That's taken you a long time.
I'm going to express my disappointment publicly that we're in this position, because it was in March 2022 that we committed to that, and yet it wasn't until the 13th of February 2023 that a draft, which Joe has described as a very, very draft ERP, and in fact a form that can't even be put to us at the moment, was going to be put to us potentially. And I've scratched my head wondering why costings weren't firmed up, why an ERP that was in a draft form that we could have chewed over didn't come to us in 2022 in the 10 months between then and February. I'm looking at the roadmap, and I asked this to be printed and put at everyone's desk today so that we could actually physically see where we're meant to be sitting, and I feel like we're not even at 2022. I'm really, really frustrated that there is such nuanced, if not even nuanced, just absolute implications in this report, that staff pushing back saying we can't achieve those targets of 2030, that we should push at 2040. You know, we chose 2030 so that we could, not only as an aspirational, but we believed it was achievable, and it is achievable if we want it to be achieved. And the fact is that we don't know whether it's going to cost $31 million as paragraph 13. I don't believe that figure is based on anything. You've said in paragraph 12 it's practically impossible to meet that target, but you haven't said why it's practically impossible. A number of the steps are in the current long-term 3-year plan, as set out in Exhibit 2. So when we have this workshop early next year, can it please be as early as possible next year? Can we please have as much data as early as possible for the workshop so we can get our heads around it? Because you're going to ask us, no doubt, to reconsider a date. And I want all of us at this table to be in the know. I don't want us to be second guessing whether we should push it out to 2040, because there will be another cyclone at some point. And I remember saying at the time, when we picked that date, I do not want this to drift, and I do not want there to be an event that pushes out staff's obligations and reasons why we can't achieve it. And this is exactly what's happened. How many people in that team at the moment? How many people have been dedicated in that team since 2022?
Post-cyclone, pretty much the team was repurposed to recovery work.
Pre-cyclone?
Post-cyclone. We did have some staff changeover. We have just recruited we're actually creating a standalone climate change response team with a dedicated manager. So to date, it's sat under our strategic planning function. So to make sure we can give this work more impetus and priority, we'll have a dedicated team of 4 staff with a manager. We have recruited that manager. They're starting later in a couple of weeks in December.
Okay, so pre-Gabriel, how many people?
Was essentially to one staff member. It's a lot of work.
So one question I have on my notes is this new manager going to be responsible for achieving an ERP to bring to us in February or January?
So the purpose of bringing this paper was to get that clarity on what the priorities were for the climate change response program, so then I can task the manager with those priorities.
So you put
we will commit to a workshop. I'm hearing a workshop early in 2025 on emissions reduction.
Can I just make a quick comment? Because I was also around the table in 2019, and I definitely remember different stuff. I remember staff saying it would be very tough to do the 2030. We will possibly have to buy credits. We still pushed through, so I just want to balance what you were there as well, and a few others of us, that I am not totally surprised that we find ourselves where we are today. And that is not even saying we've had COVID and cyclones in the middle. I'm just putting that to the side. That's just stuff that happened that we glide through. I'm not surprised that we are where we are today, because I vaguely remember staff cautioning us that it is a tough target and that there might be. So I personally am really looking forward to, again, as a group, sitting down with the information and making sure it is still achievable for our region and that we are still aspirational but also realistic. Nadine.
Yes, through your worship, and part of this, what we are seeking that guidance on, so we need to reset, but the other part is actually in terms of your recovery plan and your priorities. You did not prioritise climate change. So our question there also is, so are we carrying on with this work and resourcing at the level, or should we be putting this investment into other areas and focusing in our attention accordingly to those priorities that are in your recovery? So that's also something to be thinking about in the context of this paper.
It would have been very helpful had this paper, say, been brought to us to have a discussion while we were determining the recovery plan, because this wasn't, was it?
It wasn't a priority at that time, Councillor. At that time, we were all focusing in terms of trying to respond to Cyclone Gabrielle.
I would suggest in the glory of hindsight that it should have been a priority. The other question I had was...
I can come back to you if you want.
No, I wanted to rant.
We don't mind waiting.
So the recommendations are that we continue the development of an ERP, 1A, that we develop a regional adaptation plan, and we develop a program for adaptation plans based on risk. So we've talked about our partners in the community. Have we had any support or ability to tap or resource from the other big partners in the community as they also progress their own carbon reduction and carbon emission reduction plans? Because we shouldn't be doing this on our own, right? We shouldn't be trying to do this on our own.
Again, that regional emissions reduction program, so there was a project called the Just Transitions project that was also put on hold after Gabrielle, and that hasn't been picked up yet, and that is an area where we're also looking to our partners to seek guidance on what their priorities are, because since it is included in our 3-year plan as still a project that is for consideration, but as far as since the 3-year plan, the regional economic plan has come out, and that does not include, so that Just Transitions was a project that was included in the previous Tairāwhiti Economic Action Plan. It's not in the new one. It's got more of a circular economy focus. So it is an area. So in answer to your question, sorry, excuse me. No, we haven't been out and got direction. So from the climate change team, it's not worked with our partners to understand their priorities in that space.
Okay, well, I'm happy to move the paper. I'd also like some indication of when you think we might have this workshop. Is it going to be February?
Based on the draft, so when the paper was being drafted, it was the schedule hadn't been confirmed for next year, but the 6th of March was the first Sustainable Tairāwhiti meeting in the new year.
Page 25.
We don't necessarily have to wait till that meeting date to have a workshop, though.
Okay, anyone else wants to ask a question?
I asked a question just then, Madam Chair.
Gregory.
Madam Chair, I asked a question. Can we have a workshop before the Sustainable Hui on the 6th?
No, it's on the 6th of March.
I would be, just because we have a new manager starting and new staff in the team, I would, and with the lead-in times required for a workshop, for that workshop agenda to get to you, and it being Christmas and everything, I would say it would be a struggle to get a good amount of data to you. Really.
Thank you. I've got just a statement and a question. Firstly, I was also around the table when we set that target, and I do remember it the same as the Mayor, that we were called and my view was that I didn't want to see us trying to beat the government to be carbon zero, that we should align ourselves with what our government was doing rather than try and race it through and put ourselves into debt by buying carbon credits, but continue the actions that we are continuing on to reduce emissions. And so I will second this report, and I'm looking forward to digging into it more and getting more information. But my one question was, I read the Auditor General's Council's report to the General around the country about the actions on climate change, and I note that several councils are collaborating on climate change. Is there any opportunity for us to also collaborate with perhaps Hawke's Bay, who have done a pilot study with managing coastal inundation and blah blah, which is also our problem, and I just wonder if there's any opportunities for us to do that.
Yes, we are working closely with networks across New Zealand, so there's an Aotearoa Climate Adaptation Network, which is a network of council staff that get together so we collectively share information. There's also through Kahika opportunities. We've just joined a collective procurement for a local emissions data tool. So that's, we've collectively procured a tool to help show our regional emissions, and that also includes ways to test mitigation options within that tool. So that's just being progressed. I think it's our data is just being input into the tool at the moment, so we'll hopefully have an update on what that looks like when the tool is ready to go. So there are definitely opportunities. There are also opportunities in the adaptation space, as you mentioned.
In short, yes.
Yes,
thank you.
We are a small team, and we take as much opportunity to share the collective insight.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thanks for the paper. Yeah, I also had a number of questions on this paper. A lot of which have already been said by Andy, whatnot, with 88% of the emissions from waste and over half the landfill. I was just wondering, are our resources in the right places? The question was, what are our resources? What is our current staff? Says the budget was reduced. I'd sort of like to know, what was the budget? What was it reduced to? Because we're hiring 2 new staff. If it's drastically reduced, should we be hiring new staff? Also, the numbers, what is our actual emission shortfall? Have we got enough insetting for this? Do we have to buy carbon credits? Does this affect our council budgets? For me, I just would have liked to see a few more actual numbers with budgets, staffing, and everything else. For example, walking and cycling, we won 28 million. We got 800k, which is tied up with Grey Street and Uawa, so there is no budget there. So there should be no resourcing there till the end of 2027. Just for me, there's just a lot of detail and a lot of gaps. Maybe when it comes back, we can sort of fill those gaps. If these targets aren't met, does it affect our other budgets, etc.?
So just to give you a bit of background of the transition, as it was said, in the early stages of the direction was just prior to the adoption of the long-term plan, which was 2021. And at that time, it says we need to come back to you with the actual costings and things around that. And that high-level costings came through around about December. So you had adopted the long-term plan, and what these kind of costings came out and said it was around about 31 million. So, and then Gabrielle hit the very in the next 2 or 3 months associated with it. And so when you were grappling with the 24 to 27 3-year plan, the difficulties was how do you implement that when you're actually against your debt cap as well. But I just want to say that most of the things that were identified was in the solid waste area, where 67% of the 31 million was in that space. And the 3-year plan takes that into account. It says, what are we doing? What are your next steps that you actually need to do in terms of your reduction, or how you actually manage that is within the waste streams going into that. And predominantly, you've got that in your 3-year plan, is to deal with that. So the next part of it is to come back, what were the other elements that were identified? And some of those things I see within that progress we've actually done. So fundamentally the program or the map is still continuing. It just needs to confirm at what pace and where will we get, or what won't we achieve. But also at that time when that direction for net zero at 2030 was, it says it was conditional on the financial, on how you actually do that. So I'm just giving you the kind of the brief in terms of where it was, where it landed, but nearly 70% was in the waste stream, and we've actually got that fundamentally a process of doing that within the 24 to 27 3-year plan.
Cool. Councillor Parata and then Alpha.
I wasn't here when the conversation was first put to the table, so I just want that noted. Not all the mahi that we do at council will be as visionary as the conversation is about climate adaptation, so I just want to acknowledge that first and foremost. And secondly, I also understand why it didn't feature as a priority in our recovery plans, because we had to really think about the response, and climate adaptation tends to be about what's going to happen in the future and making plans that are going to be long-term benefits for the region. Our recovery plan was about what our people needed today, tomorrow, the next 3 years. So I understand that. But going forward, it's my belief that a lot of energy and thought and innovation needs to be put into this space. But I don't think council can or should do this alone. I really, really believe that there are enough clever, passionate people in this region that should be invited to the table, and it should be a regional plan. Council has a part to play, but council isn't the only player in the space. I think council should lead the conversation, but bring others into this space to see how we can all be contributing to climate adaptation for our region, for the benefit of our people going forward. So I just want that noted and reflected somewhere. Thirdly, I don't know how many points I've got. When we think about the workshop, it's quite clear to me, I'll talk about myself, I'm not the cleverest person in this room. There are other really clever people, and when we have this workshop, I really hope that some of them will be invited to share their thoughts, ideas, innovations around climate adaptation, so that we can be well informed when we make decisions. Because left to our own devices with only one perspective, that perspective being council, that is not diverse enough for us to all have meaningful input into climate adaptation going forward. And I have one more point.
We can circle back.
So yeah, that really is my main thought. If I can think about it again, I will. But otherwise, I wholeheartedly support the paper. I'm grateful it's come back, and hope that going forward we put a lot of energy into it. Oh, sorry, that was my point. That there's lots of important mahi that council does. None will be more important than climate adaptation to our people in the future. And the other thing that people really care about is resource consent. So those two things together. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Telfer.
Yeah, being a new councillor, we weren't here when those conversations were had, so we're running a little bit blind and we haven't actually had the information in front of us to make a real judgment on that. But one thing I noticed was on page 19 on the graph of the landfill. Since 2000, that landfill was emitting 35,000 tonnes, and it's been dropping off really quickly, and we're now down to currently 10,000 tonnes, and we talked about how it's tapering right off. So I just want to make sure that if we're going to go and look at doing things and spending money, we're not doing it just to make ourselves feel good about it. It's got to be justified. We've got a thing that's tapering off anyway. It's already saying here that the palm basically offsets that we're going to be able to get from there are going to be coming on stream from 2026 and more or less by 2033 they're almost going to be meeting what that is offsetting. So I just want to be very clear we don't go down a rabbit hole for the sake of making ourselves feel good about ourselves when there are things that we can actually control and go down and get a real bang for our dollar. So that's
Any other comments or questions or people that haven't spoken yet? People that have spoken yet want to add anything else? If not, I've got a mover in Councillor Robinson. I've got a seconder in Councillor Gregory. All in favour? Aye. Contrary? Carried. We'll have a quick coffee break and we'll be back 10:20. Councillors, I take you to page 29. And Joe, this is a good update for councillors in regards to, you can just give us the...
Yes, we have Charlotte Knight here,
Hello, Charlotte.
ready to give a brief intro overview to the paper.
Just again remind councillors about the RMA changes, and then we are talking about what it possibly means to us, but I think it would be good if you just give us a 1-minute background, timing and stuff.
Yes. We had a late change to the first RM amendment bill which prevents councils from notifying freshwater planning instruments unless we have an exemption from the Minister. There's one of two dates, whichever is the sooner, the 31st of December 25 or when the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management has been updated and published. So in terms of Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan Review, there were 3 planned notifications in 2025 that are affected by this amendment. One being the multi-management plan, which you've seen a couple of times now. The forestry plan changes, which you've seen a couple of reports on as well, and then the regional policy statement, which there has been a little bit of work done through the Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan Committee around approach for that one. So, in terms of this paper, what are we asking? We're seeking, I guess, your direction on what your preferred approach is around delaying notifications or seeking exemptions around these 3 particular items. Based on the possible reasons a minister may grant an exemption, which are outlined in that amendment bill and your paper, I think at number 3 in the report, we've suggested an approach where we're seeking an amendment just for the forestry plan change mahi, based on what we're seeking for that. With an exemption application, we do need to include a copy of what we want to notify. So in terms of the decision today, we would need to come back early next year with the actual what we're planning to notify plan change before we actually wrote to the minister around that, just to clarify that. So we wouldn't be writing, as of today. And it is a little bit unclear on potential turnaround times when requesting an exemption. So just flagging that based on how that process rolls out and whether we do or do not get it, that would impact on the notification date as well. And also just to reiterate that despite this, the team are continuing to work on our plan change work mahi and work that we can do in the background to keep progressing these 3 plan changes alongside the other plan change work that we've got. And yeah, just seeking your direction and we will pivot.
Councillor Kahika, before we go to you, I think what we need to, because we're talking about 3 pieces of work here, so I think let's talk about the first one. I'm going to open the floor soon, but I think once people have asked their questions, we'll then just do a rationale through each and take it from there. Councillor Farahina.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I do have some direction to give to staff, but I also want to make a statement to the table and also to council as an organisation. I'm so annoyed at this Wellington-based decision being the delay in our regional decisions. You know, as elected councillors, we did the work. We sat, this council, this isn't a past council work that's been done, it's this current council. We sat in this room, we did the work, we read the papers, we debated this in chambers, and we came to a conclusion about how we will move forward with our planning instruments for forestry and for freshwater. These things that are most critical to our community, especially post-Cyclone Gabriel. And now the work and fundamentally the locally, regionally elected decisions that we made all get put on pause until when? The end of next year. 13-month delay by a central government decision. I don't think that's good enough. I'm glad staff are recommending to push back on continuing with the forestry notification and seeking an exemption there. I would also, in terms of the direction that I said that I would send to staff, I would also really like us to consider seeking an exemption for the freshwater plans as well. I do understand that as staff you are in tune with the finer decision making in central government. But to me personally, as an elected councillor, you cannot do the forestry plan change without also doing the freshwater planning. Because where does our forestry slash end up? In our freshwater. Our slash affected communities are communities that live around the rivers. They are screaming at us, at council, to get this sorted. The forestry industry itself, from the business owners to the contractors to the workers that are on the ground, are also screaming at us to update our forestry and water catchment rules. They don't use that language. They tell us to get our together. And now we actually can't get our shit together. Sorry for the swear. But it is a statement that our forestry community have used with us, and we can't get that together because of this government's national policy statement being published in December 2025. You may not even be here as councillors. I won't be here because I've said this is my last term. I'm not running again. And I don't like to get personal in council, but I am personally so angry that a central government decision means I can't get this sorted as a locally, regionally elected councillor. I was the top polling councillor for 3 out of my 4 terms in council, including this last council, and I can't get this done for our region, and I'm so angry about that. 13 months away. 13 months we have until we have to wait until we can start having and it's not a cordial with our community, it's a facts-to-facts based conversation with our community about how we move forward. Our community doesn't have time to wait. 2023 was a hellish year. The years preceding that were also brutal. 13 months is a long time, especially when we know what a brutal 13 months we had prior to Cyclone Gabriel. We've all received feedback from the community about how old and outdated our plans are. We've all received that. This is how they become outdated, by adding a 13-month delay. In 30 months' time, the costs will go up. The budget that we approve through our 3-year plan and our long-term planning will probably increase, and that cost increase ends up on the shoulders of our regional ratepayers. We all agreed that we wanted to sort this out with urgency, hence the timeframes that we asked staff to approach this with urgency. And guess what? Because we have to wait for a national policy statement, we can't until December 2025. Merry Christmas, everybody. And not this Christmas, next Christmas. The only thing that motivates me to move this recommendation is that the staff have obviously looked at what we could push back on, and they've chosen the forestry plan. But if there's any feasible way to push back on it all, I would support that. And that's the question that I have to ask you, Charlotte. Is there any feasible way we could push back on the freshwater parts of these plans as well? Because our community need us to do this.
And
In terms of the planned notifications for 2025, we could ask around an exemption for the regional policy statement and the Motu catchment plan. We can ask, hence why we brought this forward to you today. With the other freshwater planning instruments, we had planned to notify those in 2026 anyway, so that you're referring to around the regional freshwater plan and then the other catchment plans, just to clarify.
Just supplementary to that, I also, as an elected councillor, don't like sending staff on wild goose chases as well. Is asking you because I know that as staff, you will follow the direction of this table. But am I inadvertently setting you and council staff up on a wild goose chase, asking these questions?
Through you, Your Worship, the government has been very clear that council should pause their freshwater planning in anticipation of the national direction changing. So it would be my view that the more targeted we can be in terms of any exemptions, the greater likelihood of success. But I am crystal ball gazing to some extent. And also given the signals that central government has given that, yes, we acknowledge the challenges you have around your land use in Tairāwhiti and some of those activities, including forestry, occurring on that vulnerable land.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, staff. Thank you very much, Your Worship, for allowing me. There's a little time to rant about this, but this is what I felt when I read this paper. All this work that we did as councillors, it's wasted from this Wellington decision. But I'm supportive of the recommendations that are here. I would love to see us get to bring those freshwater planning community engagements forward more. Thank you very much.
Councillor Alder and then Councillor Karakia.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move the paper.
I think already did it, so you can second.
You did move it. I'll second it. Thank you. And thank you, Josh, for that passionate. I hear where you're coming from, but I do think we don't want to waste any more energy and then have a policy come through that really has wasted that energy. And the commitment is to continue doing what we can do. I have one reservation around forestry, and on a little bit of consultation, established that the forestry industry is happy with the negotiation with council staff and the way things are going, but they do have some reservations, thank you, Debbie, around some of the planting directives. And I just encourage staff to keep listening to these foresters and trust them. I think that the majority of them do have our region's interests at heart, and they are experts in the field of trees. And yeah, I urge the staff to listen and not go down a path where, we're going to spend a fortune on planting natives that are all eaten by deer, for example. Or we plant poplar trees that are going to be no different to giant pine trees in 50 years' time, and they're going to blow over and clog our waterways. These guys know what they're doing. Anyway, thank you.
A couple of things. Talking about freshwater management is it's my favourite topic. It's my most passionate topic. I don't want a delay. I don't want a delay based on signals and indications and interpretations. Especially for freshwater management, the region needs to move forward, and if central government have not provided us with a single solid date communication, then we carry on with the work. But Motu, if the whānau at Motu have said to delay, well, kei te pai tērā. But I just don't believe that we need to keep looking at interpreting what the minister is saying and looking at signals and then deciding as a council what we do or don't do. And I don't think that about everything, but in particular, freshwater management, because nothing is more important than our ability to protect our water. So that firstly. Secondly is, can I please request that all papers that come to the Sustainable Tairāwhiti table has a Tiriti compass analysis attached to it? I can't understand why an in-depth analysis the compass analysis has not been applied to this paper when the implications of delay are so profound. Could somebody explain that to me, please?
Through you, Your Worship, this was prepared in haste. So normally we would, a paper, because of the last minute amendment to the legislation and the need to get something to this table so we could have a clear sense of where we went in terms of seeking exemptions or not. And because, yeah, and that's why, you know, normally a paper like this, it would be a more holistic, in-depth analysis. But we really wanted to get something to this committee meeting because otherwise we're probably going into the new year. I totally understand where you're coming from.
Depending on where the vote lands for these particular papers, I do ask that if there's an opportunity to come back with that analysis so that we can be more informed on our decisions and what the impacts of that decisions are in regards to our obligations to Te Reo Waitangi. Thank you.
I had Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. I just wondered, I understand that the government sets the rules and that we have to do what we have to do. I've only been here for 5 years, but I've seen that constantly occur. And I appreciate that you're taking pause to consider what happens next. When it comes to the forestry one, when you're talking about the change in rules, you're talking about overlay 3B and...
So through you, Your Worship, there are sort of two streams of forestry plan change work. What we're talking about now is that first plan change, which is more tailored rules around forestry activities in our region. And then the land overlay 3B and that wider land use conversation is on a slightly longer time frame because there are some, you know, big issues that need to be worked through with landowners, with the industry, with tangata whenua before that plan change is notified.
And when I went back to the other report we had, it said that there was going to be a look into the economic result of the rule change, and has that been done, and do we get to see that before we make any decisions?
Through you, Your Worship, I am having an update on the economic modelling this week, in fact, so there is a draft in place. We're also getting a second peer review of that work too, and all that information would come to you before, as a package, before, as Charlotte Knight mentioned, we sought any exemption from the Minister or move to notify a proposed plan change.
Okay, and one last question is, do you have an indication as to whether you will get the exemption on the forestry change, noting that Shane Jones came to town and said that if you're not interested in forestry, you're at the wrong meeting?
So, through you, Your Worship, Shane Jones is not the Minister for Forestry, so we have had ongoing conversations both with officials and the Mayor and Nadina, the MPs, and the relevant Minister. And as we understand it, he does fully understand the issues that we face as a region and understand the need for something that works for Tairāwhiti as opposed to the national environmental standards.
Cool. So I can update you a little bit on that, where the last time I spoke with the Minister was really mindful that the changes happening in the ESCF, he knows it creates uncertainty for everyone. We all know, and the risk is highlighted, point number 15 on page 34, that we'll be doing work and by the time they get their stuff sorted, it's a little bit out of sync. But the clear message I have received from the Minister, and he has said this in the media, and I have said this in the media, so it is on record, is that the changes in the NESCF that he's aiming for is more the easy, low-lying stuff. He's well aware what we are dealing with and working with are the more high-risk areas. So he's very supportive of the work we are doing. And like Councillor Aldous said earlier, there's real momentum now between the forestry industry, landowners, Māori landowners, everyone involved to try and get workable solutions that work for our region. So there is open dialogue there. And yes, Minister Jones is not the Forestry Minister. We only talked to Minister Macleay about forestry, and that is open dialogue for us. With him, he's very sympathetic what we're trying to do. I asked him about, because some changes they want to do to the freshwater, there are 2 changes they want to make. And I can't remember the first one, but the second one was where you can allow for slash catch in your freshwater management plans. But he sees us as a special case that they will make sure what we are trying to achieve is not hindered by what they are doing. And the indication he gave me is that they're looking around May, because it is not a fast process. So we'll be moving alongside them. This is what I'm trying to say. We'll be working on our side, they'll be working on their side, and hopefully we meet in a good place.
Thank you.
Whose hand was up? Councillor Pahuruhuriwai or Councillor Telfer? Who wants to go first? You go first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to support Councillor Wharehinga's sentiments and to support the motion, I think we've come too far with our communities and with everybody involved, getting them on board to start having the conversation with us and moving towards the plans in all the areas that we're looking at. 15 months is far too long, and as you say, Joe, crystal ball gazing, well, we don't know what that's going to look like in 15 months' time, but we know what our situation regionally looks like now, and all of the staff have worked really hard to engage all of the key stakeholders, and I think we just need to keep moving forward. And as information is coming through from central government, that's fed and communicated back to our communities as quickly as possible. I don't think we can afford to stop. We need to keep going. Otherwise, we lose that community engagement, industry engagement. We lose all of that, and there's been a lot of effort put into it. So carry on, keep going, keep doing the good mahi that you've been doing, and yeah, we'll deal with the other stuff as it comes. Kia ora.
Councillor Telfer.
You know, I support this paper, and you know, we know the reasons why the settings are being changed. There weren't, for a lot of places were going to be impacted largely. This is not saying that council staff are going to stop working on. We're setting up catchment plans. All the stuff needs to be done, and it does take time. And we will know what these new settings are in due course. So I totally support it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I support what Josh has said. I struggle now. We sort of reap what happens, but we're not the ones making the decisions. I really struggle with that. Just one question, sort of off track a bit, I suppose. In terms of the way things are, do we have the ability to stop any new plantings in our district till we can properly sort out the problems we've got rather than add more problems? Do we have that ability as things are? Are we able to put that in place?
So through your worship, under the current Tairāwhiti Resource Management Plan and National Environmental Standards, it depends a bit where the planting's occurring. So in some areas it's a permitted activity. In other areas it is part of a consent process. And we are, as consent applications come through for harvest and then looking at replant, we are carefully considering particularly the land that's been identified as highly susceptible to erosion and land movement. And areas are now being removed from replanting that would have been potentially included, say, 2 or 3 years ago.
So, as council, we don't have the ability to stop any new plantings on farmland?
Through you, Your Worship, that would need a plan change. So that's the bit we don't have in place yet to sort of have that control. At the moment, forestry in general terms, under the general zoning of the district plan, primary production activities like forestry tend to be a permitted activity in the rural zone, and most of our farmland is rural zone.
Really struggle with that, how it's that this is our place, our whenua, and we can't.
Your Worship, I mean, just to be clear, it's not that we couldn't progress a plan change to change the rules, but that would that needs quite a lot of work, and obviously engagement with each individual landowner, because people don't tend to like being told how they can and can't use their land. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but there's a process you need to go through.
No more questions or queries. We do have a mover, seconder, right of reply. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I do just want to speak about the fact that we've talked, there's been a few people around this table that have talked about how staff will be doing work on this in the meantime. But I need to remind us it's a facts-based community notification conversation piece that is delayed. We can't do anything. We can't move any of this forward until that conversation happens. And that actually can't happen until 2026 because the delay for the national policy statement is pushed out to December 2025. What we're reconciling and resolving as a council is that we're not going to talk to our community and have a fact-based conversation with our community until 2026. I need us to understand that, yes, staff can do all of the work and all of those kinds of things, but let me just kind of give an example. We can think about what car we're going to buy as much as we want, but we don't actually get to decide what car we buy until we talk to our significant other, our wife, our husband about that purchase. That discussion is not happening until 2026, so nothing feasibly can happen until 2026. Our community can't afford this delay. I'm glad that we're pushing in regards to the forestry stuff, but it would be great if we were also, as a council and as a community, vocal about the freshwater planning instruments and bringing those forward too. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
All in favour?
Aye.
Oh, can I have it noted that
Voted against, noted, Councillor Parata. Okay, councillors. This is the end of our Sustainable Tairāwhiti meeting.